I am Karaja Malio. My family and I have been subjected to lawfare that has undermined our fundamental right to due process. Our sole goal has been to safeguard my elderly mother-in-law, who has dementia, from physical isolation and financial exploitation by influential figures and officers of the judicial system. These corrupt professionals use the law to identify, leverage loopholes of accountability so they can prey on vulnerable adults to acquire property and other assets. No one can escape because when people try to expose them, they use their connections and the system to silence them. We have been the recipient of the pointy part of this corruption of Florida for 3 years. Imagine how long an average person would last without resources, such as homes to mortgage or retirement accounts to liquidate. No older person is safe. Why this matters and how it happens. One of the mechanisms used is power of attorney, or POA, an unregulated legal process in the state of Florida, and no one understands its limitations better than those inside the judicial system. Florida's primary industry and driver is development and growth. In Hernando County, Weeki Wachee, Florida, over 400 homes are under construction within a 1-mile radius after rezoning allowed higher densities. Areas once consisting of 5-acre mini ranches now hold high-end homes on 1/8-acre lots. The most desirable properties lie in mixed commercial residential zones. Which brings us to the church and the targeted property. At the center of this case is a small church, historically independent of any diocese, which relied upon donor support to survive. A long-standing community pillar that supports the underprivileged. However, it sits on a highly desirable piece of land. Over these 3 years, the target has become clear, the church property. The story also involves a former church president currently suffering from dementia, and her estranged eldest daughter, a recently fired general magistrate specializing in guardianship. Over 40 church members knew the president that she feared this daughter who had a reputation for exploiting vulnerable adults using the legal system. One by one, older adults, even non-relatives, became assets in what has become a cottage industry of exploitation. The scheme, the former general magistrate, took advantage of her mother's declining mental capacity and POA to file multiple lawsuits in her name. The numerous lawsuits are a case example of how to litigate by the margins. The ex-magistrate judge used taxpayer resources and paralegals to draft hundreds of motions for her personal gain in this lawfare. This is one of the reasons she was fired for cause. The targeting of the church. One of the fraudulent lawsuits was aimed at the church. The claim that the former president owned the church and she had been unlawfully removed. The lawsuit alleged financial misconduct. Upon investigation, checks worth thousands of dollars were found to have been written to the estranged daughter by the former president, and shockingly without any receipts indicating their purpose. The ex-magistrate and her cronies used donor intimidation to smother the church's financial resources, as it is independent of any diocese and has historically relied upon private support and donations to survive. At the same time as the church lawsuits, a relentless smear campaign was lodged, and proven to be false accusations were used to target individual church members and donors, aiming to intimidate them and dissuade them from testifying about what they knew in an ongoing guardianship case. This lawsuit was ultimately dismissed after the church mortgaged its property to gain funds to defend itself. The case collapsed when the former president was required to testify, revealing she lacked capacity. The judge ruled that her testimony was not credible, showcasing that at one point she even expressed that her verified signature was a forgery. The judge also referred to the fact that no professional determination of her competency had been made in the guardianship at that time or subsequently. During the hearing, the court and persons involved became aware that the former administrator was claiming to have met with board members who were either never officially on the board, deceased at a time, or in hospice, and could not have possibly all met together at the time she claimed to have conversed with them. While she can appear cognizant in short conversations, this is not the only time where people have witnessed her merge present reality with some fiction, a mix of old memories and people as if they were recent occurrences. The lawsuit was withdrawn, but the damage was completely done. The church was financially crippled. Coercion and control. The formerly estranged daughter who holds PAA had previously not seen her mother more than 5 times in 38 years. The mother had taken steps years earlier to remove her from her will and assets, believing the assets were protected. However, it was not enough. The estranged daughter was aware for years that she had been disowned for having exploited an elderly aunt, even upon her deathbed, and additionally had voiced to multiple relatives that she did not care that she was disowned, since her parents did not have anything of value anyway. She did not show any interest in her mother until after learning that her mother had recently been referred to a neurologist for a diagnosis of the type of dementia that she had. Her mother was afraid to be diagnosed because she did not want her employer to learn that she had been practicing as a psychiatric ARNP overseeing prisoners in the county jail while her faculties were in decline. Furthermore, in the property on which her mother resided, in addition to the church property, were now worth millions of dollars to a developer. The ex-magistrate coerced her mother to give her POA by threatening to expose her misdeeds at her job in the church and forced her to defame the second daughter, who was earning her Master of Sciences in Gerontology at the time and had been taking care of her mother and her father for years and had an unimpeachable reputation. The entire family, all cousins, nieces, nephews, siblings, husband, daughters, longtime friends, all banded together against the ex-magistrate to file and support a case for guardianship in an attempt to stop the exploitation. But the estranged daughter moved the mother prior to the examination committee's impoundment and would not release her location of the mother to the court or to the family, leading to a missing persons report having to be filed. Ultimately, the family themselves located the mother in the town where the ex-magistrate had worked for decades in South Florida, where she has a long-standing relationship with an assisted living facility where she has created her cottage industry by housing and financially exploiting other elderly people in independent living, which is also a virtually unregulated process. She holds POA over each of them, isolates them from their loved ones, liquidates their assets, and ultimately turns them into wards of the state while maintaining a cut from the facility, which is potentially Medicare fraud. Now, judicial manipulation. Due to personal relationships in the judiciary, an unprecedented ruling allowed the mother to plead the fifth in the guardianship case, preventing proper medical evaluation. The examining committee could not determine capacity because access was blocked. Despite this, the judge ruled against the family seeking guardianship, excluded all witnesses who had not seen her in more than 8 months, ignoring the fact that she had been isolated from all her family and friends for 2 years at the time. The ruling is currently in the appellate court, but the South Florida judge presiding over the case is pushing for a shams ruling on May 5th, 2026, with damages exceeding $250,000. These are punitive, and has ignored any request for the case to be stayed pending the appeal or to go to a jury as is required by law due to the costs. This is dangerous. The situation puts all vulnerable adults at Florida at risk. If these rulings stands, anyone with assets can be targeted using POA. It can be weaponized without oversight. Families have little legal recourses. This pattern could spread beyond Florida as legal systems often mirror one another. The ongoing impact. On a positive note, like David against Goliath, the church is seeing the fruits of its faith and its labors, actively rebuilding its flock with assets and newly formed alliances and a core group of volunteers. The hand of God can be witnessed in its continuing endeavors, which now include a nonprofit, fully accredited private school that caters to underprivileged children. Through the church's fight for survival, the remaining parishioners have enacted plans that, if it is God's will make it self-sufficient again, and eventually independent of donor contributions. A call to action. This lawfare must be exposed before more families are impacted. We have the facts, the witnesses, the documentation, but we cannot fight this alone. Please donate to help fund the fight against systematic exploitation by the judiciary. Your contribution is tax deductible. God bless.